Thank you for participating in the Community Foundation Candidate Forum. Please briefly introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Appelbaum. I have been involved in Boulder local civic affairs for perhaps 3 decades now, serving on a wide variety of city boards and committees and commissions and task forces, and been involved in some of the local groups, particularly Sierra Club and Plan Boulder County. Served on the city council from 1987 to 1995. I was deputy mayor for 4 of those years. I've gotten back on the council in 2007, and in February I was honored with the position of mayor upon Sean McGrath's leaving to accept the job with the Obama administration. So that's been quite interesting for the past few months, serving as mayor. And I just think a lot of challenges out there for Boulder in the next several years, but I think a lot of opportunities that I'd like to be involved in.
Tell us about your personal involvement with Boulder County's nonprofit community.
Well, this goes back a ways, my initial involvement, and it's in some ways still the most important to me. Essentially, the very first thing that I did when I got involved in civic activities was I joined the Community Development Block Grant Committee. And back in those days, this was this wonderful committee that looked at how to allocate the funding from the federal government. It's done differently now. And it was open membership, and typically there were 4 or 5 dozen members, most of them really representing nonprofit agencies, mostly human service agencies, but not entirely. And I served on that committee for 4 years, and in fact they elected me as, I think, co-chair and then chair for a couple of years. And it was the best possible education you could get on the nonprofit community, all the different aspects of it, what all of these groups do, how they do their funding, how they do their fundraising, how they can be more efficient. It was fascinating. You got to talk to the people, the staff gave you lots of information. It was the best possible grounding in that community. And I was pretty new to town at that point. But even though that was a long time ago, that really shaped my thoughts about just how incredibly important that community is to Boulder. Now, since then, serving on the city council, of course, I've had many opportunities to learn about, work with, deal with the difficult issues of funding many of these agencies. But I really harken back to that original effort, and just how interesting all of it was, and how much I learned, and for me at least, how much it gave me a perspective on the essential nature of these nonprofits in the Boulder community.
The Community Foundation has identified a lack of diversity in representation both among the elected officials and among nonprofit leadership. How can the city increase its inclusiveness, particularly in hearing from marginalized community members?
It's a tough problem, and it's something I've worked on for a long time, obviously not with immense success, nowhere near the success that we need to have. When I was on council the first 8 years, I was very involved in working with our boards and commissions. I had served on some. I think they're a very important part of the city process, and equally importantly, a way for people to get involved in the city and work themselves up into leadership positions. And I and others on the council and the city staff really worked hard to figure out ways to encourage people from underrepresented communities to get involved in the city. Limited success, unfortunately, probably lots of reasons for that. Clearly the same is true at all aspects of government and, in the nonprofit community as well. I'm not sure what the answer is. I think you just have to work more closely with those communities, with those people. Certainly reach out to the leaders in that community, but do it on a more ongoing basis. I think we tend to do it in a kind of spotty way. Something comes up, like application for a board, and we do go out there, and I think we do try, perhaps not hard enough, but that doesn't create the ongoing relationship that you need to have with these communities, and in particular with the leaders in those communities. And we just need to do a better job. There needs to be a real partnership. I mean, it works both ways. both sides need to be involved and they need to believe it's a priority. But I think it is a priority, or else, the underrepresented communities, you've used the term marginalized, will remain that way. And not only isn't that good for them, but equally importantly, it's not good for the larger community.
What are your ideas on addressing volatile sales tax revenues, a portion of which is used to support local nonprofits?
Well, I served on the Blue Ribbon Commission 1, which looked at the revenue structure in the city. This was only a few years ago. There's now a Blue Ribbon Commission 2, whose report is due later this year on expenditures. They, of course, relate to one another. You need a comprehensive budget and revenue plan. But on the revenue side in particular, we need to work with the community and really figure out ways to diversify our revenues away from the volatile sales tax sector so that we can stabilize them, the revenues. And this is not an easy problem. Cities in Colorado have very limited ways to diversify their revenues, which is why most of them are so dependent on sales taxes. Boulder a little less so than others. Our revenues, although they've taken a hit this year, have been a little more stable than those of surrounding communities, and I think that speaks to the efforts we've made to make that happen, and also the nature of our community. But Boulder has long had a very high level of city services, and one aspect of those services, very important aspect, is in fact human services, affordable housing, supporting the nonprofits. And I hope our community will continue to see the benefits in doing that and will work with the city to find ways to support ways to diversify those revenues. And yes, some of that may be some new taxes, some new fees, taking a look at how we charge them now, making sure that the fees are assessed appropriately, that growth pays appropriately, and so on. Not an easy problem. It's definitely going to take a lot of work with the community and a lot of community support to make this happen.
Anything else you'd like to share with the nonprofit community?
Yeah, just briefly. I think people think of Boulder. Boulder's a great place to live. It's a desirable place, maybe too desirable if you look at housing prices. And what comes to your mind initially is the open space, the university, the federal labs, the high-tech entrepreneurial community. There's a lot of things that people have as a picture in their mind of Boulder. But Boulder is, of course, really more than that. It's most importantly the people who are here, and that's all the people, and some of them we don't think about as much as others. But to really be a successful community, especially in the future, you have to have a diverse population, socioeconomic diversity that's going to be hard to maintain in Boulder. You have to support the human services. You have to make all of this work as a whole. And for the nonprofit community, again, hearkening back to my days on the Community Development Committee, this can't work without that community. You need to support them. You need to nurture them. You need to collaborate with them. You need to have partnerships. And you need to really make sure that the community as a whole is working towards the same goals.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.